We recently had a chance to show you the Ultra HDMI, an HDMI mod kit for the N64 that goes far beyond our initial expectations. But this isn't the only HDMI mod kit that has come about. I'd assumed that HDMI for retro consoles would simply be a method for getting results similar to what you can achieve with analog RGB through an HDMI upscaler like the Framemeister. But the Ultra HDMI opened my eyes to how these more advanced mods can be finely tuned to deal with each system's unique quirks. So when we had a chance to borrow a Hi-Def NES from RetroRGB.com, we couldn't wait to see what it was capable of firsthand. Let's check out this HDMI mod for the NES and see how it compares to RGB.
NES video quality has nowhere to go but up. With composite video as its best option, some might think that the original hardware does a poor job of showcasing its games without modification. In this episode, we're going to assume that you already know about the NES's RGB mods. If you need to catch up, check out RGB302, which is all about NES and Famicom video quality. The Hi-Def NES is a mod kit created by Kevin Horton, better known as Kevtris. It can be installed in front loaders, top loaders, and AV Famicoms. And you know how the Analogue Nt is just a rebuilt NES using old NES chips, right? Well, the Analogue Nt's HDMI solution uses Kevtris's board and software, so all the features and results you'll see here for the Hi-Def NES apply to the Analogue Nt as well. It's also compatible with PAL consoles. The Hi-Def NES board actually provides the NES with power through a more efficient modern design. It creates digital video and audio straight from the NES's chips before it's ever turned into analog, so it's capable of producing the purest noise-free image that is possible when using real NES hardware, featuring virtually no input lag. You can bring up the Hi-Def NES menu by holding left and select, or another combo of your choosing. Kinda weird seeing an overlay like this on top of an NES game, right? Supported output resolutions are 480p, 720p, and 1080p. 720p will always fill top to bottom with all the NES's 240 horizontal lines, because 720 is an exact 3x multiple of 240. Regarding 1080p, something important is hidden away in Save and Options. The choice is between a perfect 4x vertical scale, which will leave some empty space at the top and bottom, or 4.5x, which will fill more of the screen, but pixel height will not be uniform. Here's Try with a bit more on why pixel uniformity can be important.
Despite its limited vertical options, the Hi-Def NES gives you just a ton of control over the image's horizontal size. Markers along the way suggest desirable settings. At 1080p, this runs the gamut from a 4x horizontal scale all the way up to filling your HD TV's 16:9 screen, which we don't recommend, but hey, who's gonna stop ya? So you might notice that where it marks 4:3 for a 16:9 display is not a perfect integer scale, meaning it's not scaled to a multiple of the original lower resolution width. If you're using a 4x vertical scale on a 1080p display, you might expect that you should match the horizontal scale with 4x. But I don't know, it looks maybe a bit too skinny. This is because retro consoles don't necessarily use square pixels. They're expected to be stretched just a bit wider by the display. The 4:3 marker sets the image to the width of an old CRT. But this highlights one of the challenges we face in trying to reconcile these new and old technologies. Because the image is so sharp, but the pixels are not uniform, horizontal scrolling at a non-integer scale can create a sort of shimmering distortion. Watch the rocky cliffside in Contra here. But just a bit to the left of 4:3 is a perfect 5x horizontal scale, which creates pixel uniformity across the image and makes for smooth scrolling. This means that every NES pixel takes up a perfect 5x4 block of pixels on your HD TV. Notice that the scrolling distortion is completely gone. Now, of course, Scanlines are a critical feature for a lot of people. Some of these don't seem to line up correctly at 1080p, so let's go with the NES setting. You can adjust the darkness of the scanlines however you like. I guess this is okay, but they're so thin as to make almost no impact. It looks inauthentic to me. If you're familiar with trying to get scanlines to work with the Framemeister, then you might be aware that 720p tends to work better than 1080p, even on a native 1080p screen. Setting the Hi-Def NES for 720p, we find a very similar result. The scanlines are much bolder, and the softer, lower resolution image comes closer to matching what you might expect to see on a high-quality CRT like a PVM. However, be aware that depending on your HD TV, upscaling a 720p image to 1080p may introduce some extra lag. Fixing the horizontal issues with integer scaling is a bit trickier at 720p. The 4x3 marker isn't nearly as close to the next integer as it is on 1080p. I thought rounding up to the 4x scale was maybe a bit too wide, so I went with 3x. That makes for square pixels, meaning a somewhat too skinny image, but it doesn't bother me too much. You might even prefer it. One feature that we were unable to test is interpolation. Basically, this is a blurring effect in the horizontal axis only, intended to simulate a CRT effect. But on the unit we tested, it simply didn't work no matter what we tried. I wonder if it could help with the scrolling issues at a non-integer horizontal scale. Unfortunately, we just couldn't find a convincing answer for this, and it seems to not work for other people as well. Other settings in the Hi-Def NES include smoothing options, if you're into that sort of thing. Color palettes, I just stuck with the default, it seems pretty authentic. And cropping, cutting out the extraneous visual junk that was mostly past the edges of your old CRT. There are also a number of audio settings that really let you get down to the metal of the NES sound hardware, if you're savvy enough with that kind of stuff. With the combined cost of the mod kit plus the services of an installer, you're looking at something in the ballpark of a $200 upgrade here. So the big question is, if you're using RGB for the rest of your retro gaming setup, is the Hi-Def NES worth it? Let's take a look. We've got Tim Worthington's NES RGB board scaled to 1080p through the Framemeister, using profiles downloaded from the Pixel Purist, meaning we're comparing against the exact same sharp and clean 4x vertical scale that we've got on the Hi-Def NES. And they're really, really close. With the NES RGB through the Framemeister, we're of course processing a high-quality analog signal and then outputting it via HDMI. But with the Hi-Def NES, the image never became analog in the first place, so we're getting a truly lossless image. But still, noise really isn't showing up in the RGB image, and in terms of sharpness, they're surprisingly close. The way that the Framemeister scales in the horizontal direction, the shimmering distortion that we get with non-integer scales on the Hi-Def NES isn't an issue for any size, allowing greater flexibility in matching the correct aspect ratio. Even though what we've got here on the Framemeister is skinnier than 5x, but wider than 4x, it scrolls perfectly. And naturally, if you primarily play on a CRT, the NES RGB mod is still the way to go. In my mind, the biggest missing feature that I most wish the Hi-Def NES had is an option to scale vertically outside the bounds of your TV's resolution. See, I've gotten really used to the 5x scale profiles from the Pixel Purist, which do cause your display to cut off some of the image at 1080p. But in most cases, I actually really like this because, well, it makes the picture quite a bit bigger and comes really close to approximating the amount that would be cut off by an old CRT anyway, mostly only losing picture information that was expected to be lost and overscan. Some games do need a 4x scale to not lose something important at the edges, but I really wish that the Hi-Def NES at least gave me the option to make the overall image bigger. Some games with generous borders on the top and bottom, like Super Mario Bros. 3, just look a bit too small to me, but you know, I could get used to it if I had to.
So let's check it out. 4 ways to play NES games on your HD TV with HDMI. RGB through the Framemeister, Hi-Def NES, Wii U Virtual Console, and the Retron 5. Yeah, I have no idea why Nintendo goes for the smudgy look, but at least we've got great options for playing original cartridges. Going into this, we knew that the Hi-Def NES wasn't going to have the same revolutionary potential as the Ultra HDMI for N64, because RGB on the NES is already really good. But once we dialed in the settings, we found ourselves more and more impressed. We'd say it's probably better at artificial scanlines than the Framemeister, but we wish the sizing options offered more flexibility. Still, the Hi-Def NES is a great addition to the growing list of options for playing retro games in the modern age, and the only method to get a pure digital signal out of the original NES hardware.